Jonathan Merrick, Assistant Director of Technology and Geoeconomic Affairs here at NBR, and excited to welcome you to this important and timely event on really a critical topic that NBR has covered across the 2+ decades of our energy security program, and that is U.S.-Japan energy and energy security cooperation. I'll just provide a couple of brief housekeeping notes before we get started with the event. Please keep yourselves muted throughout the course of the program. You can mute yourself in the bottom left of your screen, and then we will have time for audience Q&A and discussion. So when we get to that point, please either drop your questions in the chat box or raise your virtual hand to be called on, and keep your questions brief and in the form of a question. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce NBR's president, Michael Wills, to provide a few brief opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Jonathan, and thank everybody for joining us today. As Jonathan mentioned, we've worked on energy security issues for more than 2 decades here at NBR. It's one of our 3 core research program areas. And last year, as we were looking ahead to 2026, we were anticipating that this would be a year of continued uncertainty in energy markets. At the time, we were thinking about the impact of ongoing sanctions on Russia following its invasion of Ukraine, and the impact of those sanctioned oil supplies having on oil and gas markets worldwide. Obviously, we've been seeing massive increase in demand from the tech sector for growth of data centers and AI, given the developments in that area. Just in the last 2 months, though, we've seen some pretty dramatic changes and additional uncertainties with the U.S. activities both in Venezuela at the beginning of January, and then the current situation that's unfolding in the Middle East. So that backdrop of uncertainty is very much the framework within which we're looking at the issue of U.S.-Japan energy cooperation today. On the good side, though, the United States and Japan have had a long and very positive, productive relationship and collaborative relationship looking at energy security and resilience issues. These are important parts of both governments' drives toward bolstering their economic security. And as examples, we've seen potential growth of US LNG exports to Japan as part of Japan's diversification of its energy mix, while allowing the United States to export LNG to a key ally in Asia. Great potential for collaboration in nuclear energy development, especially in this the growth of clean energy for data center and AI build-outs that both countries are focusing on. And obviously, energy cooperation was a key part of the $550 billion investment framework that the United States and Japan agreed last year. And just in the last few weeks, we've seen some specific examples of Japanese investments in energy projects in the United States as part of that effort. Glad we're having this discussion here this month. In just a couple of weeks' time, Tokyo will host an energy security ministerial meeting where the government representatives will talk about these issues in more detail. And that's obviously a preview of the shortly thereafter summit meeting that Prime Minister Takaichi and President Donald Trump will hold in Washington, scheduled for March 19th. So today's discussion is really very timely and a good opportunity to hear from some real expert speakers who can unpack both Japan's energy security goals, the new strategic energy program of the Japanese government, and how the United States and Japan can continue to work together to strengthen their collaboration. Our discussion will be moderated by Mike Herberg, who's a professor at the University of California, San Diego, and a longtime research director for NBR's energy security program. And it's my pleasure now to turn the mic over to Mike and to let him run the proceedings from here. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Can you all hear me there? Are we on the screen? Good. Yeah, welcome everybody. I think we got a great program today, an excellent couple of speakers, and a topic that's in the last week or two become even more critical for both the U.S. and Japan in terms of energy security, national economic resilience. As we approach the upcoming U.S.-Japan summit, March 19th in D.C., Prime Minister Takaichi and President Trump, today's the opportunity to kind of take stock on how energy security, energy resilience will play a part in that meeting and the results of that meeting. What might we expect? What do we think each side is trying to achieve in terms of energy collaboration, deals, cooperation in the context of the existing trade agreement and other things? As background, Michael mentioned there will be the Indo-Pacific Energy Security Ministerial and Business Forum on March 14th and 15th in Tokyo, co-hosted by METI of Japan and the Energy Dominance Council of the U.S. And I think the plan there is to bring forward energy deals to announce at the summit, hopefully, seek additions to the $36 billion of projects that have already been announced just recently, and move closer towards that $550 billion big big target commitment by Japan made in last year's trade agreement. The U.S. and Japan, just a few background comments. The U.S. and Japan have a long history of energy cooperation, as Michael mentioned. I mean, it goes all the way back to the working together to establish the International Energy Agency all the way back in the 1970s in response to the first Arab oil embargo. So it goes way back. In a sense, the last 15 years is really a tale of two cities, or a tale of two countries in terms of energy security and resilience. Japan has spent 15 years recovering from the Fukushima tragedy, the loss of, for a long time, all of its nuclear generating capacity, which really provoked one of the worst, maybe perhaps the worst energy security crisis for Japan since the 1970s. And it spent the last 15 years with LNG and other fuels trying to reconstruct as strong an energy security base as possible. LNG, as I said, been the key to that. The U.S., in a sense, just the opposite. We've spent the last 15 years building an enormous oil production machine and an enormous natural gas production machine based on all that shale oil and gas development. So we're essentially self-sufficient in oil, crude oils, and products, and have become the world's largest exporter of LNG. So in a sense, it's a match made in heaven. LNG is critical to Japan. The U.S. now an enormous exporter of LNG, also a huge exporter of crude oil, although net importer-exporter. So really a tale of two countries, but that, in a sense, is the perfect basis for partnership cooperation as we go forward. Entering Trump, the 2.0 era, we see new efforts to move on that collaboration. Last year's trade agreement and the large commitment on investments in the U.S., LNG, as well as nuclear and small modular reactor nuclear cooperation play a role in that. Efforts to forge major new energy deals and expand LNG business, and also efforts to enlist Japanese companies to invest in and agree to offtake for this proposed Alaska LNG project, which obviously raises a number of collateral issues. So it's a good time to take stock. What do we expect in the summit? This summit should be an important milestone in this expanding U.S.-Japan energy cooperation, strengthen Japan's energy security, economic resilience, and national economic security, and build further on U.S. energy expansion and business opportunities. And as Michael alluded to, we are in the midst of another energy shock, hopefully short-term energy shock, which is only bringing to the fore issues related to Japan's dependence on imported oil and gas supplies, particularly from the Gulf. As of the moment, the Straits of Hormuz are basically closed. So this is a moment in which these issues are real, acute, and right front and center. So it'll be interesting to see how this affects the summit March 19th. What might we expect from the summit and the ministerial forum? We have two fabulous experts to discuss prospects from both the Japanese and U.S. perspective on this. From Japan, Ken Koyama, Senior Managing Director and Chief Economist in charge of the Research Strategy Unit at the Institute of Energy Economics Japan, where he held various positions for many years. He's also a professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy at the University of Tokyo, published extensively on these issues. I can't think of anybody who's more who is more appropriate and authoritative to discuss Japan's energy security issues and its prospects for energy collaboration with the U.S. We also have from the U.S. side Kurt Glaubitz, co-founder of the Asia Natural Gas Energy and Energy Association, NGA for short, and president of Glaubitz Energy Advisory LLC. He previously served in a number of roles at Chevron, including general manager for corporate affairs, Asia Pacific Exploration Production Unit, where he managed government affairs, communication, and social development programs for Chevron's upstream presence in the Asia Pacific region. Prior to that, he served a number of roles of communications and public affairs. So we couldn't have two better people to talk about this issue. I think maybe if we could start with Ken, maybe briefly talk about Japan's seventh strategic energy plan, what role LNG plays in that, and some of the challenges that Japan faces in balancing the different fuels and also moving forward towards its decarbonization commitments at the same time. So if Ken, you would begin talking about that, and Kurt, we will move to you after Ken makes a few opening remarks, and maybe give us your perspective from the U.S. side, what you think the U.S. is looking for as we go forward on this path to the U.S.-Japan cooperation. So with that long-winded introduction, Ken, can we move it over to Ken? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. Very good morning to you all. And firstly, I'd like to thank the NBL for having me today, and very kind introduction by Mikhail. As always, thank you very much indeed. As he suggested to me that I'd like to briefly touch upon the importance of strategic energy plan, that the latest version, which was cabinet approved about a year ago. We in Japan always continue to work on the strategic energy plan to be revised in every 3 years. This strategic energy plan have so-called S+3E principles: safety, energy security, environmental protection, and economic efficiency, which should be pursued and materialized in simultaneous way. And the latest version, of course, has a S+3 principle, including the very aspirational, ambitious target to reduce GHG emission reduction in the year 2040 by 73% as compared to the level of 2013. But in reality, the most important challenge for the latest version of SEP is enhanced energy security, or in other words, to secure a stable energy supply at affordable price. This is a seriously important challenge for us in Japan, but probably in the United States and everywhere in the world. And under the circumstance that the security of LNG supply is regarded highly important. And as a first attempt of the strategic energy plan, the latest version includes so-called strategic plan B, which means that if our aspirational target cannot be met by some difficulties, for example, difficulty to realize that the very challenging target to increase the renewable capacity, something must fill the gap between the aspirational target and reality. And the answer to this strategic plan B is the increase in LNG. And actually, in this plan B, Japan's total LNG import requirement will increase from now on up to 2040. So, of course, much depends on the economic growth and other element which can fluctuate a lot. But the point is that we need to secure LNG from a reliable source at an affordable price. So I think in the context of surviving in the difficult and unpredictable world, the security of LNG is regarded highly important in the current strategic energy plan. And another very important policy priority is given to nuclear power. The latest version has a kind of historic shift in nuclear policy. After Fukushima disaster, every time that the strategic energy plan was revised, the government of Japan continued to declare that we need to reduce nuclear dependence as much as possible. But for the first time after the nuclear disaster, the SEP, Strategic Energy Plan, clearly identified we need to maximize the use of nuclear power. The reason is very simple. Even we made a serious effort to restart existing nuclear fleet, there are still remaining about 20 nuclear fleet which is unutilized. Of course, because of that accident, we are not able to use this unidled nuclear power. But if the safety is met, and also if we can successfully get the people's acceptance in Japan and utilize this existing stable and zero emission and competitive nuclear supply source, Japan may be able to successfully make an energy transition up to 2040, potentially with reduction in energy cost and reduction in CO2 emission and contribution for stable power supply. As Mikhail and Michael pointed out, even in Japan, we are now seeing our long-term power demand is increasing simply because of the AI and the data center. And this is, again, that the very historic departure. In the past 2 decades, we continue to see our long-term power demand is declining. But for the first time in the last 20 years, we are now seeing our long-term power demand is going to rise. This has a serious implication for energy security in Japan, and this leads to the discussion on the strategic energy plan quite significantly. So I do believe that LNG security of supply and nuclear power is the 2 major engines for the successful conclusion of the strategic energy plan discussion. But finally, lastly, very briefly, today's topic is LNG and nuclear, which is very important. But also, in my understanding, in particular under the current Takaichi government, I think that the economic security and resilience for Japanese economy is also very important. In this regard, that the clean energy dominance by China or that the rare earth dominance in China is going to be seen as a serious energy policy challenge as well. I do believe that the Takaichi government tried to address these difficult, complex challenges, and also we are hoping that the forthcoming energy ministerial in Japan and Takaichi-san's visit to Washington to meet Mr. Trump, we can successfully make a great progress in U.S.-Japan energy cooperation. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very, very interesting as always. I can get your point about the other key issue or the elephant in the room is China's dominance of rare earth minerals, particularly, but the supply chain for so many of the critical minerals that will be critical to both Japan and the U.S. in the future. That's kind of, in a sense, the elephant in the room for the next stage of energy development. So with that, can we switch to Kurt Glaubitz? Kurt, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. And also thank you to NBR for this opportunity. As Mike, you mentioned, this is a very timely conversation given current events. Maybe just to start, on the US side, the Trump administration established a national energy dominance strategy last year. US energy dominance recognizes that, as Mike said, the US is the largest producer of oil and gas and the largest exporter of LNG to the world, a position it achieved back in 2023, sorry. The administration believes that the national energy dominance will reduce energy costs for Americans, it will create jobs, and it will increase American competitiveness globally. They have stated that they will accomplish this by, and as we've seen, rolling back regulations, opening up federal lands to development, and increasing access to global markets for US energy supply. The National Security Strategy, which was published last year, recognizes this, and it identifies energy security as being critical to national security, and that dominance over strategic resources will deter adversaries and secure the nation's interest. So if we look at now the US-Japan alliance, energy is quite central to the bilateral relationship. And this is certainly has increased given geopolitical tensions, as Mike and Michael mentioned, with Venezuela and now currently in the Middle East. So we can look at the relationship between the US and Japan on three levels. First, from a foreign policy perspective, the US sees energy as a key component in its diplomatic efforts. The US understands that energy security is essential for Japan and the Indo-Pacific region, and that many nations are dependent on imports and also vulnerable to potential supply disruptions. And just as US LNG came to the aid of Europe after the Ukraine invasion, so too does this administration see oil and gas shipments as supporting allies in Asia. The US also understands that the growth that's occurring within economies in the region requires reliable, affordable energy, and that that's central to development. US sees Japan as seeking greater influence in the region through the development of energy infrastructure and the investments that Japan and its companies have made in energy systems. That's particularly important to Japan's own energy security, but also to developing countries, particularly in Southeast Asia. And then secondly, if we look at this from a defense perspective, the US administration sees energy security, economic security, and national security as inextricably linked. They are asking and hoping that allies will build resilience, and that could be within their oil and gas supply chains, or, as Koyama-san mentioned, in nuclear energy as well. This is important also for the US to ensure uninterrupted fuel supplies that foster its defense efforts and the military exercises that it conducts within the region. And as we've seen, the US has welcomed Japan's plan to increase defense spending to 2% of GDP by next year, and it wants to assist the nation in boosting its capabilities. From an energy perspective, Japan has done quite a bit of work to build energy stocks, But there is opportunity for further cooperation and collaboration by establishing joint response mechanisms, data sharing, drawdown agreements, bunkering, and buffering that potentially prevent supply disruptions. And then third, from the relationship is important from a trade perspective. And this is what we've seen from last year's agreement that took place. In fact, energy has been central to all the trade agreements that the Trump administration has pursued, whether that's the EU, India, or Japan. And certainly the Japanese agreement was a milestone for this administration. I would say the announcement between Washington and Tokyo initially focused on building critical energy infrastructure, both in oil and gas, and also the construction of nuclear facilities out there. And as we've seen, Japan has moved very quickly, and in February announced the first tranche of $36 billion in investments in energy infrastructure and manufacturing. So ahead of the summit that takes place, as mentioned, the energy ministers from across the region will be meeting in Tokyo the weekend after this. And this will be the first convention of the ministers since the conflict in Iran. I see that at that event, there's an opportunity to establish a commitment by the nations that no country should be faced with coercion or crisis that weaken their energy systems. They could agree to support policies that would increase supply to markets, promote cooperation between producers and consumers in building energy supply chains, foster the development of new technologies that lead to new and more efficient energy deployment, creating pricing hubs that promote market stability. And so we've seen quite a bit of volatility both in oil and gas markets over the last few weeks. And then establish joint response mechanisms that prevent those disruptions from taking place. So in conclusion, I'd say looking at what we might expect from the summit, I would imagine we would see an agreement to work together to achieve energy security for both nations as well as for countries across the Indo-Pacific region. And then we'll likely see additional agreements on project development, both on the hydrocarbon side, on nuclear side. We'll see increased energy trade agreements put in place. We'll see greater cooperation to build nuclear value chains, and then additionally further support for manufacturing and economic development within the region. So maybe just pause there, and Mike, turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. That was a terrific, crisp summary, I think, of how the administration views this. Maybe I could go back to Ken and Kurt has sketched out some of the things he thinks that the Trump administration will be looking for in this upcoming ministerial and a summit on the energy side. How do you see the Takaichi government approaching this? What do you think that it's looking to achieve during the summit on the energy side? Can you dealing with the Trump administration obviously is a little delicate process, and Takaichi is new to her role. So I would think that this would be a very delicate point for them. And how do you think they will be approaching this episode?
Okay. Mikao, thank you very much for asking me a very wonderful question to me. I'd like to make my comment from several angles. Firstly, Prime Minister Takaichi is now standing in a very unique position. Probably many of you know that the result of that historic landslide victory by Takaichi-san led LDP last month, that the real majority seat was now given to LDP with as Takaichi-san Prime Minister. So in this context, for the next at least probably 2 years, her political position is rather stable, in particular in comparison to the previous administration. So this means that she will be able to address the various challenging or difficult policy agenda for the next 2-3 years. And in the energy space, I think that there are very sensitive and difficult area, included nuclear power in Japan, of course. Even though we are working very hard, that still nuclear issue is politically, socially sensitive. So we are now making a maximum effort to best utilize the existing nuclear fleet, as I touched upon earlier, but probably we will need a contribution from new capacity, new build, replacement, and new technology, including SMR, or in the long run, maybe fusion. So I think that this rather delicate and politically sensitive area will be potentially highlighted by Takaichi-san. And I think that this is the case for the other energy policy areas, including the relation with the major allies like United States. As Mikhail pointed out, I think that the US-Japan alliance is most important from the viewpoint of Japan, of course. And we need to make a serious effort to further enhance this alliance. And so far, since the inauguration of Trump 2.0, Japanese government worked successfully, in my understanding. The previous Prime Minister Ishiba met Mr. Trump and had a summit meeting, which became very successful. And with the negotiation of tariff and trade, as Kurt pointed out, that the energy cooperation or energy element continue to be a central part of this agreement and enhancement of cooperation. We are hoping and we look forward to the very successful further agreement or achievement in this area, but at the same time, it is not so easy at all. And also, the point here is that Takaichi-san is very much prioritized on the energy security. I mentioned in the talk about the strategic energy plan, we always put S plus 3E. But in my understanding, Takaichi-san's real priority is stable, affordable energy supply to Japanese consumer and Japanese industry so that we can survive in this very unpredictable and difficult, complex global energy landscape. How to realize our prioritized policy and with cooperation with the United States, that is a really big issue for Takaichi-san's policy challenge for the near-term future. And in this context, I think that she will make a serious and great effort to make this summit meeting and energy ministerial will become very successful.
Okay, thank you. Kurt, do you have any reaction to what Ken just said? How you think the Trump administration folks will approach this, in a sense, a bit the atmospherics? I think you sketched out broad goals, which I think are absolutely there, but this is a very deal-driven government, administration, and so if we have, in a sense, Takaichi-san trying to talk about the broad strategic dimensions of energy and energy security, at the same time, you're going to want, Ludwig and the people at Commerce are going to be pounding the table for deals. So how do you think that interaction might take place?
I think, Mike, it's a good point. I think that there's maybe a meeting in the middle here where we're going to see increased collaboration across the value chain. We've already seen it as we've seen Japanese firms invest further down the chain now into upstream developments in the US, some of the shale developments that we've seen in the Haynesville, companies taking positions there. I do think that it's beneficial for Japan because they're seeking greater control of supply and also mitigating potential price risk associated with any volatility in Henry Hub pricing. I think the two of them can work, the US and Japan can work together both on increasing supply coming out of the US, investment into these projects, and also working to increase the penetration of LNG supplies into the market in Indo-Pacific in an attempt to move nations from coal to gas. And of course, many of those countries are going to be price sensitive. And so further supply is going to help to shift to cleaner forms of energy out there, which is clearly a stated goal of Japanese government. I think you brought up the Alaska LNG project. I would envision we'll see deals associated with that. I could potentially see loan guarantees or support through the US Exim Bank or the DFC to further that project along. We might also see, not outside the realm of possibility, given what we've seen in other sectors, the US take equity stakes in some of these projects out there, be a shareholder to help further development along. So I think, yes, there will be this desire to get a tally of, agreements. We'll probably see that in Tokyo, in the summit that the forum that takes place. But I do also think that it will enhance overall energy systems within the Indo-Pacific region, and I think the two countries are well positioned to achieve that.
Yeah. I guess just one further follow up on that. I know when I talk to my Japanese friends and others, the issue here is cost, and Ken made a strong point, and I think I hear that regularly. Affordability in this context that we're in the world today, secure supply and affordable supply, particularly for Japanese industry and consumers, is a really critical matter. And the Alaska project, we have to say, is let's say challenged in terms of affordability of what those supplies are likely to be. Do you think, and Ken, after he talks about this, I'd be interested in your thoughts, but do you see the administration being willing to do things which bring down the cost, subsidize the cost, however you want to say it, low interest loans or, guaranteed loans, like you said, taking equity interest in the project, ways that can effectively bring down the cost structure of this project, which is going to be a real pain point. I mean, the Alaska project is great from Alaska's perspective in terms of transportation. Short transportation distance, it has real advantages on that score. So if the cost structure can be brought closer into line with what Japan might feel is affordable, could make a huge difference in whether we get some sort of a moving forward on the Alaska project. I don't want to beat that project too hard, but I think it looms fairly large in the psyche of the Trump administration.
I think that's right, Mike. First, the Trump administration is going to attempt to make these projects attractive not only for investors, but for off-takers. And Certainly, the advantages of having a West Coast source of supply will be seen as beneficial for Japan, Korea, Taiwan, some of the countries that will benefit from shorter transit routes out there. The cost issues will be something that each of the projects' private equity holders will need to look at, how to bring down those costs, how to increase efficiency. I will say there may be an opportunity here for Japanese government, as JOGMEC has talked previously, sort of the technology arm of the government, talked about funding and providing technical support for LNG projects globally. There's been some signal that they may have a focus on the US. I think we'll have to wait and see. But you could see the two governments helping private industry to find a solution that makes US LNG competitive out there. I think the other important point is Japan will be looking for diversification in its supply nodes. It gets about 14% of its LNG from the Middle East, 90%, 95% of its oil coming out of the region. So they're going to be looking at making sure there's a diversity in the supplies that they're getting geographically and from a fuel standpoint as well. I think this is where there's opportunity for private industry and government to sit down to talk about how to realize these goals out there. There is sort of no organization that brings those two together. I think if we're able to see a convening of discussion around how to achieve that, I think it'll be beneficial from a government policy perspective, and I think it'll also help improve the competitiveness of LNG projects, in particular U.S. LNG projects.
Yeah. Ken, can I ask you, how do you have a feel for how the Takaichi people at the ministerial and beyond will be thinking about this Alaska project, and you made a very strong point about affordability, which I think is right, and so do you have any sense for how the Takaichi people will approach this particular issue?
My understanding is that for Takaichi-san's viewpoint, that the U.S. Enhancement of energy cooperation in the area of LNG, including Alaska, can be the critical element for the talk between the two leaders and the forthcoming ministerial as well. And I do agree that the point that Kurt made, that from the viewpoint of Japan's security of supply policy, one of the most important priority is diversification. And in the area of LNG, I think that substantial increase from U.S. LNG supply to Japan will become very, very important. And actually, in this front, some of the Japanese LNG players, like JERA or Kyushu Electric, already made a commitment or official announcement to have a contract from the US LNG suppliers. So under the circumstance, if my calculation is not incorrect, I understand that Japan's LNG import from the United States will be more than double for the coming few years. And probably for the ministerial meeting and Takaichi-san's visit to Washington, the further increase of US LNG will be seriously discussed. And in this context, I think that we can clearly recognize the locational advantage of Alaskan project, which was mentioned by Mikhail and Kurt from both sides. Short distance, avoidance of choke point, and these are clearly the very, very important issue for Japan. And the government, Takaichi-san, and the LNG industry people all realize that. But probably the most important issue coming back to that is overall the competitiveness of landed price of LNG into Japan. So under the circumstance, probably that the US government or Alaskan government and Japanese government, and including that the government-related agency like JOGMEC, work very hard to make this really happens. I think that in case of Japan, the government and industry relation is unique. We have a very close dialogue and communication between government and industries, but our situation is not same in China. If Chinese leader says you should do that, that the industry is quite not so difficult to do that. But in case of Japan, that the economic viability and the feasibility is regarded from the viewpoint of the private sector is most essential, in particular in the current difficult world.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a very, when you look at the Alaska issue, it gets very complicated because you're trading off transportation advantages, diversification advantages, but that's going up against affordability and cost issues. And so how do you square that circle? I should let me ask one more question. If somebody's monitoring, if somebody in the audience would like to ask a question, please let me know, and I'll yield the floor to someone who has a question from the audience. Otherwise, I'd like to ask both Ken and Kurt. Do you expect critical minerals, supply chains, and those kinds of issues to loom large in this ministerial meeting and in the summit? Clearly, both Japan and the U.S. have vital interests dealing with China's dominance of all these key supply chain issues, key supply chains for all these critical minerals. Do you see that playing a significant role in reaching agreements, in finding common ground in this meeting? Maybe Kurt, you could start.
Sure. Absolutely, Mike. I think there's really three elements to the discussions that'll take place. One around increased LNG flows to Japan, two, nuclear power, whether that's AP1000s or SMRs, and then third, diversification of critical mineral supply chains out there. I think that's the piece that will be fleshed out in conversations in Washington when the two leaders meet, but it clearly is a priority for the U.S. administration, stated priority to diversify and establish a supply base in the U.S. In fact, the U.S. administration has taken equity positions in certain extractive projects here. So I would see a continuation of that, and I do believe the U.S. would find a willing partner with Japan in that effort.
Ken, do you see similarly from the Japan side?
Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to briefly touch upon the SMR and the nuclear issue, and then go to the critical minerals.
Okay.
We in Japan regard that the United States is a major frontrunner of this SMR and advanced nuclear technology. And I mentioned that the current priority is given to the maximum best utilization of existing nuclear fleet. But in the long term, we need to secure the necessary and skilled manpower and supply chain industry in nuclear space. And to do that, I do believe that we need to work very hard on SMR and advanced technology to have a good student and undergraduate level for nuclear. It is very, very important. So under the circumstance, I think we need to work very hard on the new technology, including SMR. And critical mineral and rare earths, we in Japan had a very serious and difficult experience in the rare earth embargo about 10 years ago. So we learned a lot. And we also had a lesson about 50 years ago about oil crisis in the 1973 and Arab oil embargo. The point is here that it is not at all easy to diversify away from the most competitive supply source. Chinese dominance is derived from the very strong competitiveness in the supply. So to counter these dominance and very strong competitiveness, not only supply side, but also that demand side measures like resource saving, development of alternative technology, recycling, and emergency preparedness, including the international collaboration or comprehensive approach is necessary. I personally always discuss this point with my friend in the government and friend in the United States. So in this context, and the forthcoming ministerial and summit meeting, that the United States and Japan need to work in a comprehensive way to address this very complex and difficult challenge.
Yes, thank you. This is something that I think the Trump administration gets. Kurt, you may have some comments. Uh, you know, the, and what I think what's positive is that you're seeing the Trump administration actually be willing to work with other countries, allies. Think of this in a multilateral, plurilateral, whatever you want to way, alliance-based, friend-based approach to this because it simply can't be done by one country, and even as big as the U.S. is, it's a much bigger problem than that. So I think that's positive from the Trump administration's so many areas it wants to go unilaterally. I think in this area it showed willingness to broaden that approach, which I think is excellent. Do you sense that, Kurt, as well?
I think if you look at the Indo-Pacific region, clearly Japan is a strategic ally, maybe the most important ally, and very advanced. I think there's commonalities around understanding and appreciation of energy security issues here being predominant, and a willingness by the two governments to work together to achieve common goals. I believe the two, even the relationship between the two leaders will help to facilitate that collaboration. And I think they understand the issues. We're living in a very volatile world. A lot of the regions where energy is produced, there's geopolitics involved. I think the U.S. administration would like to reduce the geopolitical risk associated with energy production, and energy trade. I believe that Japan feels the same way, and given the criticality of the issue, I think we will see agreements in place and efforts that move to seriously address that issue.
Thank you. One other question for you, Kurt, is how important has Japanese investment and support in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere been to the FIDs for a lot of these U.S. LNG projects? I know from my experience the last 15 years, Japan has been very active in Washington, supporting the growth of the industry, and even has a number of equity investments in some of these projects. How important do you judge the Japanese companies have been in helping to launch a lot of these FIDs?
Yeah, from a historical perspective, Japan has been a leader in helping the LNG industry evolve. So back in the 1970s, they took equity stakes in projects in Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Australia. So they're very proactive in that space. Now we're seeing the same thing happen with US LNG projects. So Japanese companies taking equity positions. Mitsubishi has a 15% interest in LNG Canada. JERA, JAPEX, Osaka Gas, Toho Gas have equity interests in Freeport LNG. I do think you're going to see Japanese companies continue to step up, not just as off-takers, but as equity holders here to help the growth in LNG coming out of the US. US LNG is expected to double and maybe even potentially triple by 2030, 2031. Uh, those projects, sort of the third tier of projects, are going to require investment by off-takers in order to make those projects viable, not just from a offtake agreements, but also actually have shown over time their willingness to support those efforts.
Yeah, yeah.
Mika, may I?
Yes, go ahead, Ken.
I just follow up that the cut point that the forthcoming that the U.S. LNG big wave is so huge. I think that to make this large wave into the market, that the U.S. Japan work together. That will be very, very important, I think. Of course, as I mentioned, that Japan will try to increase the lifting of US LNG, but given the fact of the ultra large scale incremental from US supply, we in Japan cannot simply absorb all the volume. But we are seeing that potentially large scale market may emerge in ASEAN countries or India and South Asian countries, which all are the price sensitive market. But I think that the large big wave from the United States and others make this supply more affordable to these consumers. And not on Japan as a lifter, but also that the upstream player or aggressive in the value chain, overall value chain, we can work together to make US LNG became more available and affordable in the ASEAN country. That will be, I think, that the win-win collaboration for United States and Japan, and probably in this entire region.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, disregarding how much LNG, US LNG Japan buys and otherwise, just simply this enormous wave of supply is going to make the market more liquid, supply long, bring down prices, improve affordability. You know, obviously for ASEAN, South Asia, very price sensitive buyers, even China as well on that scale. But those prices also go down for Japan. So this is a win-win in terms of U.S. supply bringing down overall LNG costs for all the players in Asia, including Japan. So that's a plus plus. Uh, yeah, I just a final question. We're running out of time. I get the feeling that Takaichi and Trump looks like they get along to the extent we can tell, but are coming from somewhat similar political viewpoints, or at least each thinks the other is. And so that this is it fair to say that this is likely to ultimately be a very agreeable outcome and summit, and to really be able to cement this relationship, and as Ken mentioned, particularly now that the Takaichi government has this majority in the in the Diet. So that seems to me this is likely to be a very agreeable outcome from the summit overall. Do either of you have a reaction to that?
Ken?
I think that clearly that Takaichi-san will very ready to have a very good discussion to come to the agreement or concrete agreement, including a lot of important deals, can be possible. I think that her cabinet staff and METI officials and government officials, together with major industry people, is working very hard to make this successfully happen, I hope.
Yeah, yeah. Kurt?
I would just add, there's a significant commitment at the cabinet level within the Trump administration towards energy security issues. And I can envision, because of the focus on this, that we'll see agreements coming out of this and a willingness to work together to achieve the goal, mutually beneficial goals that are really critical to economic security and national security for both countries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Michael, Jonathan, we are up to our hour time limit. I like to bring my meetings in on time and under budget. So that all that oil industry experience. So do you want to, Jonathan or Michael, say a few words to wrap up our discussion? I can only say I think it's been a terrific conversation. As you can see, we couldn't find two more authoritative people to talk about this issue. So I learned a lot, and I hope the rest of the audience learned a lot.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Mike. Thanks so much for moderating the discussion, and thank you to both Ken Koyama and Kurt Glaubitz for sharing their expert insights today. At NBR, we're going to continue tracking these issues, working closely with both Mike Herberg and other experts in our network. LNG is a core focus of our work this year. Nuclear energy and SMRs is another area of focus, and the supply chain security issues that were touched upon briefly are a third. And so for those of you who are following those sets of questions in the energy security and energy geopolitics space, please stay tuned. We'll have more events and more publications coming later this year. But thanks again to Mike Herberg, Ken Koyama, and Kurt Glaubitz for joining us today for this discussion.
Thank you.